Hey brother! Guys, just a quick heads up, there are going to be spoilers for Avengers Endgame basically as soon as my next sentence. You have been warned. Okay, so the first Far From Home trailer dropped last week, and it came with a few startling revelations and/or confirmations. First of all, Marvel is totally turning into Pixar and just going for the gut punch right out of the gate with Peter crying over a mural of Iron Man. Like, why? Why? Second is that thanks to that information, we can finally confirm with total certainty that Far From Home is going to be taking place after Endgame. So yeah, like cool, good to know. Like, so all of the main cast, like MJ, Ned, Peter, and Flash all got snapped and came back at the same age. That makes sense. But perhaps the biggest bomb that they drop is right here when Peter says,
"You're saying there's a multiverse?"
What? And Mysterio is from like a totally different Earth?
Vic is from Earth, just not ours.
Okay, but like, so what does that even mean? Like, there's a whole bunch of other Spider-Man out there as well, and all of a sudden there's just gonna be like a whole bunch of Peter Parkers in the same place, like some kind of like SpiderVerse or wait. Today we are going to talk about the potential MCU Multiverse. Guys, before we get started, I want to draw your attention to CarlinBrothersCoffee.com, where we have a brand new product offering in the form of hot chocolate. This has absolutely been one of the most highly demanded products for us to be carrying for all you people out there who don't do the coffee end of things. We have spent months trying to figure out what exactly the best blend is. It is a double chocolatey chocolate flavor, and I definitely think you're gonna like it. Be sure to check it out in the description down below. All right, so first things first, what even is a multiverse and how does it work? Basically, if you're unfamiliar with the idea, it goes something like this. We have our Earth and the story that we're kind of watching play out, but in addition to that, there are just an infinite number of other Earths with basically the same cast of characters, just with slight differences here and there. And this idea offers a lot of opportunities for the MCU, but it also comes with a lot of issues. For example, it allows you to tell stories without having to actually deal with everything that we know has already happened in the main universe. So suddenly you're not competing with 20 years of writing and storylines and conclusions and MacGuffins that someone else has come up with at some other point in time. Now, you don't have to account for all of that. You can basically have a blank slate. That is a lot of fun, and you can pretty much make up the rules as you go. Like maybe Cap really did hail Hydra, or maybe Tony really did die in the cave and we get to see what the world would look like without him. Or maybe Loki somehow escapes New York with the Tesseract. I have no idea, I'm just making these up as I go. Or on the other hand, multiverses can completely suck the wind out of like any important death because they go down, but then who's lurking just right around the corner in another universe? Your old friend, or as I like to call her, Gamora. So yeah, there are pros and cons, but my real question is there even going to be one at all, or is this whole thing just a hoax? Here's the dilemma. Nick Fury says,
The snap tore a hole in our dimension.
Yes, okay, I agree. You can pretty easily justify any weird intergalactic, inter-universe phenomenon as a result of the snap. That does make sense, but I would also argue that we've already gotten an explanation for a multiverse in Endgame, and it was different from this one. So let's talk about time travel. Because time travel works in different ways in different stories, it's not always the same formula. The more popular version of time travel is actually as a loop, where you just go back in your own timeline and then affect things that just happen automatically in the present. This is what we saw in Harry Potter, where traveling back in time, you were just always there to begin with. So even though you make changes, everything happens exactly the way it happened. Or it can be like in Back to the Future, where you're traveling back in time to a place you were never there to begin with, and if you make too many changes, it can literally change the future in such a huge way to the point where you might not even exist. And neither of those things is what's happening in Endgame. Time travel is not a loop, but rather a branch. When the Avengers travel back in time, they're traveling to a point in their past on a new timeline. And their actions there do not affect the present in the main timeline. timeline. But technically they could alter the future of the new timelines. The Ancient One also further explains to Bruce that she can't give him the Time Stone because removing one of the stones from any of the timelines could result in a much darker world for that timeline. And Bruce solves this particular problem by promising that they will return the stones to that exact moment so all the other timelines never have to exist without them. Which is exactly what happens at the end of the movie. We see Cap travel back in time and return all the stones to exactly when they came from. It makes my brain hurt. Whatever. Yes, the point is there are ways to create new universes that might ultimately result in a multiverse. But that way doesn't fit in with what Nick Fury says in the Far From Home trailer.
The snap tore a hole in our dimension.
Like, why would we be changing up the explanation here? Why not just use the explanation we just learned about? And it's not like Nick Fury to not know the whole story. For that, we have to consider the source for the information, Quentin Beck, aka Mysterio, aka a father figure for Peter to look up to in the absence of Iron Man until he ultimately realizes that he is in fact a villain and then basically just takes on the helm himself. And here's the thing about Mysterio. Everything he says and does is total smoke and mirrors. He is very opportunistic, and you can bet that anything he is saying is a lie intended to improve his own glory. So really, as far as I'm concerned, the fact that he's the one saying there's a multiverse is like the number one thing that's telling me that there is definitely not a multiverse. Because to me, this sounds like a really good explanation as to how a superpowered person can show up and have an explanation for not having ever helped out before. But also give himself a lot of credibility and why others should listen to him. So, in conclusion, I think he's lying. I don't think he's from another universe. Multiverse, dead. Except there is another problem they have to deal with, specifically because it is Spider-Man and there exists something called the SpiderVerse. So, in case you missed it, Into the Spider-Verse was introduced last year and it was absolutely amazing and you should totally go see it. But it also introduced a weird conundrum into our world. Basically that any Spider-Man version at all can be summoned through the super collider thing. Let's just call it a goober. Which, to me, would that then also include the Tom Holland version of Spider-Man? But no, you can't do that because Spider-Verse is Sony and MCU is Disney, so problems. Except Spider-Man is sort of a weird case. He's actually owned by Sony but being used by Disney, so he's kind of both. Meaning he could go into the Spider-Verse, which like definitionally would mean that there is a multiverse in the MCU. Unless somehow we're talking about two multiverses, a multiverse. Okay, let's dial it back in here. Here's the bottom line. Because of the events in Endgame, we know that there are other timelines, which means that there are in fact other universes, at least in some capacity. For example, when we see Captain America come back and give Sam the shield, he is of course much older. This is not because he just went back in time and then just aged back up in the present, watching all of the events of everything that we've watched unfold. It's because he went to a totally different universe using the time machine, grew old with Peggy, and then used his weird GPS time warpy machine thing to come back to exactly where we see him. 5 seconds for the guy standing there, and as long as Cap needed for him. So at bare minimum, we do know that other universes exist and that people can in fact travel between them, but Cap had a huge advantage having the time warpy majiggy thingy that he had. Let's call it a goober. But that being said, and even though it's possible, I still think Mysterio is lying. He's either aware of the existence of other universes and lying about being from one of them, or he's making it up and is just also accidentally correct. Actually, it is not keeping in character at all for Nick Fury to not know everything that's going on. So when he says,
Beck is from Earth, just not ours,
he's actually playing both Mysterio and Peter at the same time. He hasn't called Peter in to help Mysterio fight these crazy elemental monsters. He's called him in so that he can work closely alongside him and then ultimately defeat him. Multiverses are just weird. So in conclusion, I personally think that Mysterio is just lying. In conclusion, I do think Mysterio is telling the truth. Quentin Beck is actually Uncle Ben, and that he's actually a good guy who has been able to. In conclusion, Quentin Beck and Spider-Pig will ultimately save the day. Travel from another dimension, and he's actually there to help.
How are you doing, you wonderful nerds?
But being on all the big screens, the Quentin Beck in our world is going to see it. Ireland wins, but Peter catches the snitch. Go and somehow overtake him and then assume the identity as Mysterio as a total fraud.
And then he trips over his shoelaces, but don't worry, it's a choice.
So in conclusion, Mysterio is telling the truth.
Question 17.
There just happens to be two Mysterios, one is good, one is bad. Guys, I am so curious to hear your thoughts on this one. So for my question of the day, what do you think? Will there be a multiverse? Do you think it's a good call, bad call for the MCU? Leave your thoughts in the Narwhal section down below. And guys, don't forget to go and check out CarlinBrothersCoffee.com where we have that awesome new hot chocolate for you to check out. Link is in the description down below. But guys, as always, thanks for watching. Be sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. If you'd like some more Spider-Man content from us, you can click this video to find out everything you need to know about Mysterio, or right here to see our total spoiler review of Into the Spider-Verse. But Jay, that's all I've got for you today, man. I will see you on Tuesday.